Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Last time we stopped at the section which is highlighted, in which we were reviewing once again the practice of sujood al-sahw, or the prostration for absent-mindedness. And we pointed out to this problem a number of times, and we reiterate again. The Shaykh Uthman al-Fullati, he narrates from Imam Abdurrahman al-Akhdari, right here in this section here where the arrow is pointing to. And we pointed to the problem of the prostration of forgetfulness being classified as sunnah, and then later on it being brought up as an issue that, if left off on some occasions, can invalidate the salah. So we covered that issue, that language has to be understood with nuance, that the prostration of forgetfulness or Sajda Sahw is considered sunnah. We wanted to emphasize that classification of sunnah has to be understood in a wide sense, because there are occasions in which the prostration of forgetfulness is not sunnah, but as opposed to wajib, or as opposed to an obligation, but it's actually an obligation. In other words, the term sunnah carries a number of different meanings, so we don't want to confuse those meanings. We don't want to confuse those meanings and misapply the term in the context in which it should not be applied in. And that's the problem that we were dealing with earlier on while we were working through this book, working through the Akhdari. And the reason, in part, why we went to Al Akhdari, because Al Akhdari deals with this in the same issue in a better way. But along the way, the point became clear that most of the translations that are in digital form. Now I have uh, Sheikh Aisha Bewley's translation of Al Akhdari in written form, in book form, and that one is much more fluid. It flows better. It's a better translation, but the translations that we find online are problematic. So, in our attempt to go directly to Al Akhdari, that was a discovery, uh, a matter that became apparent as we took that journey. And so we come back to the ladder of guidance, which is this text that's before us, and we work through the issue. But that's part of the dilemma of studying at times, that we're working through the issues that we encounter in the text that we study. We still have a long way to go in the English language when it comes to producing really solid text. That doesn't mean we can't benefit from them, but it does. The traditional rule does apply, that the one that relies on books more than on teachers has more mistakes than the one that relies on teachers, because a lot of the books, there's things that are said sometimes that are not necessarily clear or correct. Not, and that's not to cause doubt in all of the books, right? That's not the intention. But the intention is to say that the path of study is a process of having a teacher, being in a group setting, and having a text, as is the traditional setup for study. And in part because we miss things. Even the teacher can miss things. And the student especially the studious student, can remind, but the book itself is never completely leaned on because at times the book has to be corrected, right? Unless it is the case that the book is known to be critically edited, and even there, when you start comparing different editions and so on and so forth, sometimes you may add, sometimes you may subtract. It's a process, right? But that's why the learning system it requires a community. It requires a community. It's a little different than how we study in other areas of knowledge, in that regard. When it comes to some of these traditional fiqh texts, then there's always the issue of how do you apply the knowledge. But in any event, we have to have confidence in the books that we're utilizing. That's important. But with this understanding that it's possible at times for there to be misunderstanding of the book itself, it's possible for there to be a printing or typo or typesetting error. All of that is possible. So we have to read with caution. We read with caution. And so here in this statement, we don't take it literally because it creates a problem for us. It creates a problem for us. Uh, I'm trying to find the section. Here it goes right here. Let me see. I'm trying to find the section in which one second. And the Akhdari is a little more accessible right now. I'm trying to find it, but I don't want to extend too far out. But the idea is that if a person were to be deficient in the salah and they were to forget to make the sajda sahw and they would leave the area of prayer, that the salah would be invalid. It would not be valid. It would be invalidated. So that's an indication then that the sajda sahw, uh, in that case, because there was a deficiency in the salah and the sajda sahw was not performed along with the action itself, that was missing. And in this case, it could be one of the one of the sunan. It doesn't have to be from the arkan. The salah was invalid. That the salah was invalid because of the deficiency in the salah and the lack of praying such as sahu to cover for that, right? And so that opinion comes up in one of the scenarios. So then that changes the dynamic of this statement: prostration for forgetfulness and the prayers of sunnah. So we try to reconcile. So part of the reconciliation process is saying that, okay, here's sunnah, how we can reconcile and safeguard ourselves from falling into some sort of contradiction in understanding is that sunnah here we classify it as prophetic practice in the most general sense. And then when we apply the term sunnah in certain scenarios that may come up, it may be wajib, or it may be sunnah as opposed to wajib, instead of sunnah in the most general sense. And that's where we should be sensitive to the way that terms are used. So here he says, as for the circumstances for the prostration of forgetfulness before the salam, they are many. However, what we will mention here will be sufficient. And that's important. So what he's doing is he's laying out a framework of giving us scenarios, right? He's giving us scenarios, and those scenarios, which he's giving us, are sufficient for us to be able to determine or judge the salah to be sound or unsound. Or put in a different way, the scenarios that he's giving are enough for us to be able to know when to perform the sajda or not. When to perform the sajda or not. So the scenarios, there are many. However, what we will mention here is sufficient. Al-Akhdari said prostrating for forgetfulness in the prayer is a sunnah. We covered that ground. When two elements are left out of the prayer, one should make two prostrations before the salam. And here we're talking about the sunan. Here we're talking about the sunan, and we covered that before, the major sunan of the salah. When two elements are left out of the prayer, one should make two prostrations before the salam after the completion of the tashahhud, and one should add another tashahhud after them. This is in order that the salam comes after the tashahhud. And we talked about that in the last session as well. That this statement here, it considers that the order of actions in the salah, it has its place, right? That the salam comes after the tashahhud is not something that is renegotiable. And in the Maliki madhab, to keep to that order, that's why there's two tashahhuds, to keep to that order. Right. So one tashahhud is to cover up for the deficiency, and I mean one tashahhud is to cover the ground on what is an obligation, and then the second tashahhud is to keep to the order of affairs so that the salam falls in its place. That's one ta'leed, or one rationale that we can use in that regard. Whoever leaves out an element and adds an element should make the prostration before the salam, right? Uh, and so here, what is being considered is that if you leave out one sunnah and then you add also something to the salah, if you leave out one sunnah and you add to the salah, that you should make the prostration before the salam. And part of that is because the deficiency overpowers the addition. The deficiency here means that you left something out. So that state overpowers the fact that you added. Because usually when you add something to the salah, the prostration comes after the salam, right? But anytime there's a deficiency, and even in this case that there's a deficiency and you add it to the salah, because there's a deficiency there, the rule is that we lean towards the side of the deficiency. So the deficiency determines when we make the prostration. So all deficiencies in the salah necessitate for the prostration of forgetfulness to be before the salam. All of them. Whether you add something to the salah and you're deficient in the salah, or you just are deficient in the salah. Whoever recites silently in the prayer, what is to be recited aloud should make the prostration before the salam, because there's a deficiency. What was it that should have been done? That the recitation should have been allowed. It should be audible, should be hearable, right? And that's considered one of the major sunan. Whoever stands after making 2 rakats before sitting, but remembers before his hands and knees leave the ground, should return to the sitting. This is an important ruling. And there is no prostration required of him. But that may happen. Uh, whoever stands after making 2 rakats, you forgot the sitting posture, and then you remembered, but before you actually totally stand up, right? Then you're attempting to stand up. That should be maybe be said, and you remember that you just returned back to the position of sitting, and you complete that, and then you don't require prostration. If his hands and knees leave the ground completely and he does not return to the sitting, then he should prostrate before the salam because of the deficiency. Whoever omits a single verse from al-Fatiha should prostrate before the salam. Now, the problem here is that is that in omitting a verse, that means that you also have to make a rak'ah because your rak'ah is deficient because your Fatiha is deficient. Whoever forgets and omits the extra chapter of the Quran or both should make the prostration before the salam. So here the consistent point is that any deficiency requires prostration before the salam, whether it's a deficiency in the obligation or whether it's a deficiency in the sunnah. But as we mentioned many times before, that if you are deficient in the fard, your salah will not be complete by just making the sajda sahw. The sajda sahw has to complement you performing the fard action again, or you performing the fard action in addition to the rest of the actions in the salah. Or put it in a different way, that basically you have to make sure that you made up for the fard salah. I mean, the fard action of the salah. You have to make sure that you made up for the fard action of the salah. You cannot pray and miss an obligation in the salah and cover your deficiency with such the salah by itself. All actions that are obligatory in the salah have to be performed, right? And so that's something that we talked about before, and we just mentioned it again. Whoever omits 2 or 3 takbirs, two here are or three. It should say two or three. Tahmidat, it should not say are. This is what we were talking about, the whole issue of translation. That if you're not reading with a critical eye, this point here is two or three. And then we make up for that also in the critical reading is because here it says two or three. So why the change? Why the change? Two or three here, and then it says two or three. Because it's a typo. It happens, right? It happens. But if you're not reading critically at times, what ends up being the case is that you may not be able to realize, right, that there's a mistake in the text. And that's why reading together is important. Whoever omits two or three takbirs, two or three tahmidat, right, or the saying of Sami Allahu liman hamida should make the prostration before the salam. Should make the prostration before the salam. Whoever forgets the two tashahhud should make the prostration before the salam. Whoever forgets the first sitting until he stands completely and does not return and reaches the end of the prayer should make the prostration before the salam. Whoever says Allahu Akbar in the place of Sami Allahu liman hamida or says Sami Allahu liman hamida in the place of Allahu Akbar should return and perform what is obligatory upon him. If he, however, does not return and the time elapses, he shall make the prostration before the salam. So that, in that case, doesn't invalidate the salah because the time elapsed. Some cases, regardless of the time, you have to come back in and do the action. But that's for another discussion. Whoever assumes that the imam made salams, now we moved from the individual salat to the person praying in congregation. Whoever assumes that the imam made the salam and stand in order to make up what was missed, and then it becomes clear to him that the imam did not make the salam, should return before the imam actually makes the salam and complete what is remaining from the prayer. Why? Because of the hadith that the imam has been established to be followed, right? And the imam covers, our mistakes in the salah, right? That's the benefit of praying Salat al-Jama'ah. That if you have a mistake, the imam, as long as it's not in the arkan, the imam covers you. Whoever assumes that the imam made salams and stands in order to make up what was missed, and then it becomes clear to him that the imam did not make the salam, should return before the imam actually makes the salam and complete what is remaining from the prayer. If he returns before the imam makes the salam, then there's no prostration required of him, and it is irrelevant what he prayed before the imam made the salam. He should then stand and make up what he missed. If, however, the imam makes the salam while he is standing or bowing, he should begin by reciting Quran for the rak'ah he missed. And when he is finished, he should make the prostration before the salam. That's in the case of deficiency, right? The Mudawwana is a book that the Malikis consider to be a referential text. There's a lot to be said in the Mudawwana. I don't want to cover that ground right now. But for right now, this section is enough. And we can end here because we went back to this because we want for it to be solidified. We don't just want to go through the text. So probably the newer information is this issue about the imam. We didn't really cover that too much, right? And is important because this happens. This type of thing happens because we're interacting with the Jama'ah. We're interacting with the Jama'ah. So on the case in which we think that the Imam is salamed out, we have a deficiency in the Salah, and we think the Imam is salamed out. The scenario here is looking like, for instance, if I missed a rak'ah, if I miss a sunnah or something like that, the Imam covers for me. There's no issue. But here, the scenario appears to be if I miss something like a rak'ah, right? So I'm thinking that the Imam salamed. So I'm standing up in order to finish my rak'ah, say Salatul Dhuhr or something like that. So I came into the masjid, the Jama'ah is established, the Imam is reciting, and I realize that I miss a rak'ah. I can tell by the time, I know what time they pray usually, what time they start to pray. And I missed the rak'ah because they were they went into sujood, and so I'm clear that they performed the rak'ah. So in my mind, as an example, in my mind, all I need to do is pray one rak'ah to make up for the rak'ah that I missed. I prayed three with the jama'ah. Okay, so I'm thinking to myself, the imam, he finishes three rak'ah, or he finished on the third rak'ah, right? No, I'm sorry. He finished in the last rak'ah, and I'm thinking to myself, I have three rak'ah with him. All I have to do now is add one rak'ah. I'm thinking to myself, I have three rak'ah that I completed with him. That they're about to finish their salah. I'm thinking he's salamed out at this point. What ends up being the case is I realize he did not salam out, right? So here, what do I do? Say that I should get back to the position of sitting before the imam actually uh, makes the salam. Before the imam actually makes the salam. If I make it in the time, right before the imam makes the salam, then the imam covers for me right at that point in time. So then I don't need to make the sajda sahw because I'm covered by the imam. So then what do I do? Is this I stand up, I make up what I missed, and I salam out, and that's it. Now, the contrary scenario is if the imam makes the salam while I'm standing up or bowing, then I should make up the rak'ah and then make sajda sahw before the salam because there I have a deficiency in the salah and technically in addition as well, right? So I make up the missing part of the salah and that's the deficiency. And then the fact that I stood up and so on and so forth, I added to the salah, you know, at a time when I shouldn't add. And so I just make the prostration afterwards. I just make the prostration after I finish the tashahhud and so on and so forth, but before the salam. And and then you should be good from there. Is that clear or it's a little confusing? Think you can unmute yourself. Um,
Oh, it's somewhat a little confusing, but an understanding. Like
what
I
part?
get
What part is confusing?
all right, so I get the part right because this happened to me, right? I walk into the gym, I walk in to make the prayer. It's in motion already. So once I line up and start handling my business, right, and then I start to count the rakas and everything to see where they at. I understand that if let's say it's Isha and they completed three already and salammed out, I get back up instead of salamming out and and finish off that last raka. Do I have to make the Sajda song for that too? That's what I was just because it
Well, here
sounds
the
like it.
here the scenario is here that firstly the scenario here is dealing exactly with what you're talking about. But first, we have to clarify when are you permitted to engage in a set of actions pertaining to the salah independently? In other words, when can you move in the salah? You can only move in the salah at that point in time to make up what you need to make up after the Imam salams. Prior to that, when you make takbirat al-ihram, the most important thing that we have to remind ourselves, takbirat al-ihram, another way of thinking about it is everything is haram for us except following the Imam, right? Salah is the only thing that we should be engaged in spiritually, mentally, physically. That's the only thing we should be engaged. Everything else is prohibited to us. So then, when are we released from that? We're released from that with the salam. So in the case of you acting independently and making up the rak'ah, the green light has to uh, be manifest. And the green light is manifest with the salams. Prior to that, you're at a red light,
Gotcha.
right? And so that the majority of the scenario is saying like, look, okay, say if you're about to go, you're about to get up. Well, if you're about to get up, now you don't have permission to get up because you thought that the salam was there, but there's no salam. And and here it says, and then it becomes clear to him that the imam did not make the salam. So what do you do? So the guidance is that you return before the imam actually makes the salam. If you did that and you complete, then and you complete what's remaining from the prayer, right? With the imam. If you return before the imam makes the salam, then you don't have to make such a sahw. Now, if you stand up, the imam didn't salam yet, and you go to make up what you miss, then the imam salams while you're standing or you're bowing or whatever position you're in at that point. Now you have to begin with a new rak'ah, right? For the rak'ah that you miss. And then when you finish, you should make the sajda sahw before the salam because you have a deficiency. You get it?
I think I do get what you're saying. So okay, so let me see what I got. So you're saying like, all right, we're going back to the Isha. Got in there. They was already in motion. They're three in. Now you said. if I motion before he even salams, then I still have to do it all like kind of like all over again. But if I wait until he salams out and then everything goes, I get the green light to go back up, handle that last raka, come back, touch the Sahw, and we're clean. Am I good?
Okay, so that's one scenario.
Okay,
The other scenario is that you go to get up and you realize that he didn't salam out,
right.
right? You realize you didn't have a green light. What do you do? So you go back to your position. You finish the salah with him.
Got you.
When he salams out, then you get up to make up the part that you missed. You don't have to make Sajda Sahw because he covers your mistake.
Yeah, got you. So the one last raka that I have to make,
So
I
the,
don't have to make it.
yeah, but if he salams out while you're praying, then you have a clash there. You see what I'm saying? So
Got
then
you.
now at that point, you have to make that rak'ah and then you make sajda saw before the salam.
Got it. I got it. I got what you're saying now. I got what you're saying.
You know, and pretty much there should be deficiency in that case and an addition in the salah. So the scenario really is focused on that concept. Did you, if you stand up and you realize that he didn't salam and you still have time to go back into the position that you left, then you're covered because you're covered by the imam. So once he salams, you pray what you need to pray. You don't need to make sajda sahw. No problem. The issue comes in that if he salams out while you were thinking that he salamed, but you're praying already, then that's where you have to make sajda sahw. Does that make sense or no?
So in other words, what you're saying is like if 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 I stand up before he salams to break up that other raka, I have to do it all over, basically, like the Sajda Saha and that raka. But if I wait for him to salam out and everything like that, then it's covered. I don't have
Basically
to do it.
saying if you realize he didn't salam out, get your butt sit back down, wait till he finishes. See what I'm
Got
saying? Then you do what you need to do, and you're good.
got it.
But
I got you.
if you stood up and then while you're praying that rak'ah that you missed, you realize, oh man, the imam didn't salam out. So at that point in time, not only do you have to make the rak'ah, but you have to make such the sahw.
Got you. Got you.
That's actually a very useful uh it's a very useful piece of information, right? Because that's not an irrelevant piece of information. Sometimes in fiqh books, you can come across certain things. You're like, man, how do I practice that? You know, but this is not one of those moments, or this is not that type of piece of information that's irrelevant. You know, it actually gives you guidance because we don't realize the power of Salatul Jama'ah. The power of Salatul Jama'ah, it has a lot to do with increasing our reward and also perfecting our salah. You know what I'm saying? Covering it over from mistakes and so on. So that's why we say astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. You know, after we pray, is to cover up, to attempt to cover up deficiencies that we're not clear of. Right. It's unfortunate too that Salah has become, I think it's better now than what it was before, but it's a point of controversy. You know what I'm saying? How you pray, this, that, and it's not focused on enough, in my opinion. Um, we actually need, we can get away with the basics in Aqidah. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad. We can lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. We can get away with that. We can get away with la ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah. Have some basic knowledge in it. But we can't get away with being deficient in the knowledge of the salah itself. Because the knowledge of the salah is either your salah is sound or unsound. You know what I mean? And so when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent Muadh bin Jabal to Yemen, and he told them, "You're going to believing people," he just told them to basically call them to the oneness of Allah. But all the details in Aqidah are not mentioned. Even Imam al-Akhdari, he talks about making your Aqidah sound, and you can make your Aqidah sound in the introduction to al-Akhdari, which is a very good set of guidelines for any Muslim. It gives you the basics of just being a good Muslim that's grounded in values and the life of the soul and so on and so forth. It's not easy, but still, the idea there is just correct your Aqidah. Now, there's levels to correcting your Aqidah. There's levels to, actually, it says correct your Iman. There's levels to that because Al-Akhdari also is talking about leaving sins as a way to correct your Iman. So sometimes, in the whole battle over pedagogy and education and what do we teach when we lose priorities. And so that there's so much focus on details of Aqidah. A lot of times, arguments that are from another time period, that the whole issue of the Salah is absent, or it's made so complicated that it's not accessible. You know what I'm saying? But for all of us, we should keep reviewing till we master it. It's not going to come at one time. You know what I'm saying? But that's why we keep studying it so that we get a good grasp of it, of what to do, what not to do in the Salah, how to properly pray. And there's a lot that we don't know, in terms of the Salah. A lot of people, they think that uh you say Allahu Akbar if the Imam makes a mistake. I was in a masjid where they were doing that and told them no. You say Subhanallah. You can actually confuse the Imam saying Allahu Akbar. It sounds like somebody else established a jama'ah or whatever it may be. But the proper way, if the Imam makes a mistake and you want to alert the Imam, you say Subhanallah. And so that was a masjid of older people. So you realize they don't know how to pray. I was in another masjid where that was the same reality. The brothers, many of them did not actually know how to pray. So people they learn by seeing, and they may get the seeing part right. They may get the motions right, but then the actual mechanics of it, they're not clear on it. And when you're clear on it, when you're clear at least with the foundation of the mechanics, you're good. Like you at first it's just like it preoccupies you. But after a while you're good because you know what to do. You know how to navigate in the salah. You're not confused. And this part, Sajda Sahw, is one of the most important because Sajda Sahw, the rulings on Sajda Sahw, is kind of like when things don't go right in the salah. We're not just talking about what invalidates the salah. It's like, but when things don't go right, how do I manage it? What do I do to safeguard or save my salah so that my salah is not invalidated? Because things that invalidate your salah is kind of just upfront. Okay, my salah is invalid. But Sajda Sahw, the section of Sajda Sahw is about, well, I did this wrong, but what do I do now? you know, it doesn't fall 100% under the category of things that invalidate the salah. And that's why it's important. So it requires, as we mentioned before, some sort of mastery on everything that came before, from what, especially from what's an obligation, especially on what's a sunnah. We covered that before. You know what I'm saying? Those are the things, those are the elements of knowledge that are needed in order to really understand Sajda. So, you know, and and make it work. So it becomes like a review. So inshallah, we will end there, and we'll come back again next week, inshallah. But just continue to review that uh this section, Sajda Sahw, and we'll go from there, inshallah. May Allah accept from us and facilitate for us. Okay, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.